Hey man, how is it going today? Thank you for joining me. This is the Hands Like Hyde podcast where every job teaches and every story transforms. I'm your host Charlie Pfeiffer. Today, let's talk about support, right? We all need some support. And to kind of set this up for you, I'm going to tell you this story when I was a mason, laying rock, stone. I was learning how to do all this kind of stuff. We did a job about 2.5 hours away from home. And it's in Aberdeen, Maryland, which in Aberdeen, Maryland is the Aberdeen Proving Ground. And what comes to mind when you hear the word proving, right? So you're proving something works. Yeah, they proved like explosives and bombs and stuff like that. Ask me how I know. So we're there, and they were building this massive building, and I think this was probably one of the biggest buildings I ever worked on. I mean, it was football fields long and football fields wide. It was huge. I have no idea what they were going to do with it anyway, nor did I care. I probably forgot. But our job, though, was to lay rock, natural rock, real rock that they dig out of a quarry or out of the ground that showed up on skids. And so we had to do some shaping of it with hammers and chisels. And we were laying rock around like, a 4 foot knee wall the whole way around the building. In the front, there were some sections that went up really, really high. I don't know, maybe like 20, 30 feet high up to the top of this building. And then, of course, we had to lay rock around a dumpster. And that's where, like, where you can pick up my story is when we're laying rock around this dumpster. This was earlier on. I still had a lot to learn about laying rock. I was still kind of new to the idea of like, the techniques involved with laying rock. So a lot of times, they put me between two more seasoned stonemasons, so I didn't screw something up. But in this job, so I'm watching these guys and I'm listening to them and I'm paying attention. But I mean, back then, I was pretty arrogant, and a lot of times you couldn't really tell me anything. Sometimes, yeah, 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 I know, yeah, yeah, I know how to do that. I don't know, I didn't know what to do. I'm just gonna wing it or something like that. Well, in this case, we're laying rock and we're up, I don't know, not real high, one section of scaffold high. So, like I said, we're laying rock around a dumpster bin and we're probably about 6, 8 feet in the air, something like that. And, I got my hammer and I'm shaping the rocks and I'm laying the mud down. I'm setting the rocks on the wall. And a lot of times, if you consider laying rock is different than laying brick in that sometimes your edges where one rock meets up with the other rock isn't nice and square or flat. Sometimes there's little, you know, imperfections and bevels and different angles. And so a lot of times when you set a rock in your mud or your mortar, you need to have shims and chips and wedges to kind of wedge in to kind of hold the rock in place. And then you lay more on top, and then you hold the rock in place. And rock is they're not all the same thickness either. So like in this example, say we're laying rock that's 6 inches thick. It's just called a 6 inch veneer. And but you may lay a rock that's only 3.5 inches thick. But the rock you put on top of that might be 6 inches thick, right? So what's going to keep the big rock on top from falling back or tilting back and then making your wall look like this? If you're not watching the video, like a squiggly line climbing up a wall, is you put fill in behind the rock. So in between the rock and the wall, if that makes sense, the wall of the building, you're also building fill in behind there to support the rock, to support the stone as you're building this up. And so there's when you look at a house or a building that has natural stone on it and it looks really flat and smooth and it looks like really sweet, there's a whole lot of support and a whole lot of energy and time and engineering that went into behind the wall, which you don't see and which you'll never see. You'll never see what went in behind that stone wall unless they demolish the building, to get that stone looking sweet. So I'm laying this rock up, and one of the old timers, he said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 Charlie, your wall's getting pregnant." What? What are you talking about? Yeah, your wall's getting pregnant. What's going on? The other stonemason, the other side was like, "Oh, dude, no way, no way." And I looked, and here, this section of rock that I had been building started to bubble out. It was nice and flat and smooth, and it started to bubble out. Literally, it started getting pregnant, and you can see it moving. You could stand there and watch this rock bubbled out from the wall and about to freaking like collapse. And that's essentially what happened. It started to go so far that we ended up like holding our bellies against it and taking apart piece by piece the rock that I had just laid. And as we're doing this, it pulled one rock off, and a whole bunch of mortar fell out from behind, right? You pulled another rock off, and a whole bunch of mortar fell out from behind. And I'll never forget, I'll never forget what those guys told me. They said, that's not lightweight fill. You can't lay a rock and then dump mud between the rock and the wall. Mud is really heavy. It's water, it's sand, it's mortar, it's heavy, and it settles. And so with all the weight of the mortar that I was putting behind the wall to support the wall, air quotes, uh, it was settling down and pushing the rock away. Does that make sense? I'll never forget him, man. He's like, "That's not lightweight fill. That is not lightweight fill. No way, dude." And so we tore down this section of wall down to where the pregnant section was not no longer pregnant anymore. And I had to start relaying up some of this wall that I had just got paid to lay up. Um, what does this have to do with like support? Um, it's a good analogy and it's a good object lesson to growth and recovery in our lives as we're trying to strive to be better men, to be better leaders, to be better fathers, to be better business owners. Um, it takes scaffolding, it takes people, it takes a support system around you and behind you to to support you and carry you as you're trying to accomplish something until the end result is achieved, right? When we're laying rock, once all the mortar between the rock dries and it's cured, it doesn't really matter to have all that stuff in behind it, right? All that stuff in behind it is only there to support it while it's going through the construction process and while it's waiting for things to get solid. Does that make sense? Solidified. The mortar needs to get hard. Once the mortar's hard and it's as hard as the rock next to it, there it is. No problem. I mean, look at I'm sure you've been to an architectural place or any place where there's a stone or a brick arch, and you walk under this arch and you're like, how'd they lay the rock completely upside down and it's in place, it doesn't fall out. Same concept. They build a form, they build support to hold it while it's in the process of getting set up. Once it's hard and set up, you can knock all the supports out you want and it's good to go. That's what this whole thing has to do about support and growth. Michael Dye has this really cool quote in the book, The Genesis Process. He said, recovery is essentially the process of learning to trust again. See, that's essentially what happens to us when we're wounded in relationships, when we're damaged, when we're hurt, is we learn to not trust. We don't trust others. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust God. Um, and we learn that in order for me to navigate this world, I can't trust anyone. The problem is if you don't trust anyone, then life is going to be a struggle for you. It's always going to be a struggle. It's going to create this sense of anxiety. It's going to create pain. You're not going to have a place to go, a healthy place to go with your emotions when you're overwhelmed or when you're feeling hurt. And that's when we go to like acting out behaviors to try to numb and medicate this stuff. Recovery essentially is the process of learning to trust again. It's commonly taught in the recovery circles that, we're wounded in relationships. And so we're healed in relationships. We're wounded in relationships. And so we're healed in relationships. The problem is you have to trust relationships in order for the healing process to start. Now, I want to give you a warning. There are lots of people out there that want to help. There's lots of people out there who want to see you get better. There's a lot of people out there who would bend over backwards for you to get better. But that doesn't actually make them the right person or the right kind of support. Okay, let me say it like this. There are some people who want to help you because it fulfills in them a sense of validation, approval, affirmation, some sort of like self-seeking piece. So they're not actually there to support you for what's best for you. They're there to support you for their own sense of like wholeness, right? You follow me? That's not the right kind of support that you need. That's not selfless. That's not altruistic. That's not what you need. There's also the kind of support that's enabling. I'm sure we've all seen this. Um, I know I've been in a lot of situations where I have acted out this type of support. I love you and I support you. Um, and because I love you and because I support you, I'm going to enable you to continue some bad behavior. But here's how this plays out. Because if I stop enabling you, then I don't want to deal with the fallout of that. Because generally, when you're dealing with an unhealthy individual and they don't get their fix, they don't get what it is that they want, oh man, bombs away. It's like the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. You're laying rock, you're trying to support something up, and they decided to test a bomb, and the whole place sounds like an earthquake. It's called boom. And everybody just like stops and hangs onto the wall and says, anything falling down? That's a true story. That actually happened. And then a minute later, they let off another bomb. Boom. Right. So, like, that's like being in a relationship with someone where your support, air quotes, is enabling them. When you stop enabling, the bomb goes off and stuff gets real, right? Um, the other type of support that you want to be really careful of is paternalistic support. Paternalistic, think parent, right? Uh, Someone does for you, or you do for someone else, what they could or should do for themselves. This is a big problem in the recovery circles. And I've seen this in my own life and in my own story and some guys that I talk with as well. Uh, you can't want somebody's healing more than they want it for themselves. And if you fall into that trap, then what happens is you end up expending so much energy. You end up pursuing them and their healing in an unhealthy way, because if they're not ready, they're not ready, and you have to deal with your own sort of like uncomfortable emotions watching this person walk through life in engaging in really damaging behaviors toward themselves and others, and you just got to stand back and watch, because like you can't do for them, you can't heal for them, right? You can't do for them what they can or should do for themselves. That's paternalistic type of support. So you want to kind of watch out for those examples. So here's three ways that you can identify the right kind of support, right? So number one, does the individual or the group, do they have experience? Do they know what they're talking about? Have they walked the walk, talked the talk? Have they been down that road before? All right. So if I was on the scaffold with these stonemasons and one of them on either side of me didn't have a lot of experience laying rock, they wouldn't really have known how to correct me or how to teach me what lightweight fill is, right? And literally, this is funny. One guy literally is like, here, this is lightweight fill. And he finished his Mountain Dew and he crunched it up, this little can, and he kind of shaped it in the shape he wanted, and he put it right behind the rock wall and it was flush with the thing. And he's like, that's lightweight fill. And the other guy on the other side, he like whipped out his empty Copenhagen can. He's like, boom, he put that behind the wall with a little bit of mud and some rocks. And he's like, that's lightweight fill. And I mean, like, hey, man, you want to know where all your trash went? Look behind the rock wall. But it's funny. But do they know what they're talking about? What's their track record? Do they have the experience to actually to support you in the way that you need, right? Um, I was talking to a counselor once at a graduation party recently, and we were talking, addiction and recovery and counseling and just all this kind of stuff. And she said this thing's really funny. She's like, "Yeah, I had a client come in who was an addict from narcotics, and he was like, how can you help me? You've never been an addict before." And she's like, I just said to him straight up, she's like, "Yeah, I may not have experience with addiction, but I have experience staying sober, and so I can teach you how to do that." It was just so funny. I mean, that's a guy in denial right there. So yeah, you need to find the right kind of people who have the right kind of support and the right track record for you. A second thing to identify it's the right type of support is their grace and mercy, because when you are growing, I love this analogy. It's like whenever you try to start something new or stop a behavior, get into recovery, there's going to be a J curve, right? So a J curve is like you're going along okay, and then you try to make some changes, and it's going to get so much worse before it starts getting better, right? So that's a J curve. And so you want to find support in men in your life who have the grace and the mercy so that when you start dipping low through the J curve, they're there for you. They understand you're doing your best. You're going to struggle. You're going to make two steps forward and one step back, and you're going to try again, and you're going to slip and fall again, and you're going to relapse, and you're going to get right back into it again. Like grace and mercy. Something that you got to watch out for is like in churches, churches could say things like, and this is I'm ashamed to say this because as you guys know, as you know, I'm a Christian man. I'm involved in my church. Um, but churches, statistically speaking, aren't the place to find a grace-filled recovery group. A lot of times they're like more accountability stuff, and it's just like hard truth and a whole bunch of truth and not a whole lot of love. And if you screw up too many times, they kick you out. I mean, some of the best places that I've seen, and some of my friends who have been involved in them are like 12-step groups, like AA and SA and Narcotics Not NA groups. Like those are the type of groups where like if you have a heart to try again and get back with your sponsor and go through the steps, you can keep coming as for 50 years if you want to. They don't ever ask you to leave. Like grace-filled groups. Those are super, super important. You know, one of the dangers of finding an accountability group, straight up accountability group, where there's like a whole bunch of truth and not a lot of grace and love, is that it can reinforce your wounds. Like that's a legit thing where you're in group and you're processing with somebody, and then like there's just a whole bunch of like truth thrown at you but not a whole lot of grace. And I mean it can trigger, like say you grew up in a family where um performance was like the was what was praised. Performance, value by performance. You did it perfect, you did it great, you had a 4.0, you nailed your recital, whatever it was, perfect. Your room was kept clean, and then they gave you attaboys. They said, good job, I'm proud of you. But the moment you got A minus, or you messed up on your music recital, or the moment you left your room dirty a little bit, I mean, you were shunned, you were abandoned, you were abused, you were belittled, you were slapped in the face. You know what I'm saying? You were made fun of. And so you could find groups where it's more like accountability based, not a lot of grace and truth, not a lot of grace and love, and you can end up just kind of re-triggering all of those wounds. Um, Tim Jennings has this really cool quote. I love it. He says, "All love and no truth is hurtful, right? All truth and no love is destructive." So you really need to find a good balance of somebody who can mix that love and truth, because that's where like growth and healing really takes place. Okay. Um, and third way to identify the right kind of support is it the right fit? Right? Is it the right content and the right focus for your needs? Some groups are like really heavy on the religious biblical side. That's okay. There's secular groups, like I said, AA, SA. There's other groups that they don't really aspire to the idea of like a higher power. I'll talk more about that here in a second. You can find groups that are co-ed or not, right? Maybe you just want to do an all men's group. Maybe it's no big deal. Maybe it's you and your wife want to go to a couples group to work on something with your marriage or whatever you're going through. Um, you have groups that are task centered, right? Or processed centered. So a task centered group has a lot of homework. There's a lot of like book work, a lot of pens and papers. Most 12-step groups are like this. They're very task centered, right? You work the steps. There's a lot of lists. There's a lot of writing. There's a lot of talking about what you wrote about. Recovery and growth is like the belief goes into saying like if I want to get better, then I actually have to do something to get better, right? I can't get better just by talking about it. Well, that's what process groups are. Process groups is you're just there, you're just talking. We're processing. You probably heard some people use that terminology before. Oh, we're just processing. That means you're not really doing anything with a pen and paper, reading a book. You're just talking about what's going on. There's benefit in that as well. Um, but I want to say that healing without a belief in a higher power or belief in God isn't possible. I'm going to make that statement. I know that's a hard statement. It's not possible to heal your heart and your mind without believing in a higher power. Now, if you're this person and you've been wounded in religion and church, I feel for you And I'm sorry that that happened. I know what that's like. And I don't blame you if you're like, that God thing is a crock of crap, right? I don't blame you for saying that, because I was there for a lot of times myself. Um, but start with saying something like your higher power is your support group, or maybe your higher power is your sponsor, right? Start there. Or maybe your higher power is a therapist or your coach that you're working with. Start there. But that's only going to get you so far because, and here's why, human beings, you and I, are the highest, highest intellectual created beings on the planet, right? There's nothing higher than us. And so if you're looking to another human being as your higher power, then you can only rise to, well, the level of yourself, right? The level of that person, the level of yourself. You can't go past that. And so, what I believe is that true heart change, true character change, true, you know, driving motive transformation requires looking to God outside of yourself. Something higher than you, something higher than mankind requires that, right? Um, but here's the thing: if you view God as judge, jury, and executioner, that's no good, bro. You're you're viewing God just like human beings work, because that's what we do. We have judges and juries and executioners and lawyers and attorneys. I mean, that's our level. So if your view of God is our level, well, then it's the same as viewing your therapist as a higher power, and you're not going to get there. There's a pastor named Ty Gibson. He had this quote. I love it. He said, if your view of God puts your nerves on edge, then you have the wrong view of God, right? So, in my experience and in my story, the pivotal moment for me in my healing and transformation came when I shifted perspective, when I reframed how I viewed God, my higher power, from judge, jury, and executioner to healer. When I viewed God as a healer, yeah, man, that changed everything for me. Like, I was able to start trusting him. I was able to start making the changes in my life. I was able to quit chewing tobacco like cold turkey, soon quit alcohol, stop the weed, and then really, maybe like a year or two after that, got into recovery from my unwanted sexual behaviors. Here we are today, still growing, still working on deeper character stuff in my heart, healing my marriage with Sarah, my wife, and um, it all hinged on me changing my view of what my higher power looked like, right? Viewing God as healer is like the lightweight fill behind the rock wall. It allows this beautiful architecture that is your character, that is my character, that is myself, yourself, to be built and to be fashioned, right? Viewing God as a judge, jury, executioner is the super heavy fill. It's oppressive. It's fear based. It's like shoulder slump down, right? And man, the wall gets pregnant, and you have to tear it down, and it crumbles. And then you start over, and then you build it to a certain point, and then the whole thing falls down and it crumbles. And then you start over, and you build it up to a certain point, and you see where that can lead. It's just over and over, and I'm stuck, and I can't get past this. Why? Because you got the wrong kind of support, bro. You got the wrong kind of support. So where does this leave us for this next coming week? All right, here's what I want you to do. Make a list of the, say, 5 guys in your life who you could call on at a moment's notice. Write them out by name, list their names, one, two, three, four, five, and then write, like, what about them do you like? Why are they on that list? And then next to it, make another column, and I want you to write out, what are you struggling with? Where's this repeated thing that you keep going back to, and you keep falling in, you keep falling in? And then I want to ask you to ask yourself a tough question. Are those 5 guys the right kind of support to get you past this thing that you keep falling back into? We got to get really honest with ourselves with this. And if the answer is yes, dude, that's awesome. Lean into them, press in harder. But if the answer is no, then you know what you got to do. Your first task is to find somebody who has the right kind of support to get you to that place. I'm so glad you stuck it out with me this long. There's been a lot of content in this episode, and that's all right. Sometimes it's heavy, sometimes it's fast. My name's Charlie Pfeiffer. This is the Hands Like Hide podcast. Remember, every job teaches, every story transforms. I will see you next time. Bye bye.